Do you know, I think the changes haven't been massive over the last 2 or 3 years. The only change I think is that the teams that hadn't, we'll say, moved on in the past are now moving on as well. So you've got more teams starting to play the way that every team was playing. And whether the public likes it or not, or maybe we're dreaming back about the brilliant football that was there 30 years ago. I've looked at it during the lockdowns, and you wonder, was it as good as we all think it was? And we're listening to people in their 60s and 70s talking about how good it was. You know what? I debate that. I think it's far more tactical now. But I suppose that the teams that we spoke about, Kerry, and I think this is, I was at Cork. I have to say the Cork game was totally naive on Cork's behalf, from what I could see. I was down giving a talk with Grow Coach to 100 coaches that morning, and I watched the game afterwards. Kickouts going over the midfield with a big breeze and back standing behind their man. I just, for the life of me, I can't understand teams still doing that without understanding how to mark space. So I think the game's moved on in that shape or form. But I suppose it's coming to a point where, every team will be at that. What's going to come next? And it's hard to know. It's fine to look at Dublin now. We're all giving them praise 3 or 4 years ago. You need the horse in the stable to carry it out as well. So you look at McCaffrey gone, you look at Paul Mannion gone, even Michael Darren McCauley in the midfield. If Dublin don't replace those players, just because what they're doing may not be good enough. So we need the horses in the stable as well. So you need both. You need the coaching, and you need the players at your disposal to actually get over the line. It's not easy. We saw Kerry last year. They fell to a Tyrone team. We're all lauding Tyrone, and they won the All-Ireland. But you look at Paddy Clifford had a hand pass to put over the bar to actually win the game in normal time. If that was over, you wouldn't be talking about Tyrone. So we have to really look at defeat and victories without taking the result into account at times and say, well, look, I was lucky this year, I was unlucky last year. Who's going to get the rub of the green? And that's a huge thing. But I suppose to get over the line, you have to be in the tent. You have to be well coached. You have to be ready to win when your chance comes, and you need a bit of luck as well.
When you're doing the coaching webinars with Grow Coach, can I just ask you, like, how do you build up to one of those sessions? And you're talking about having 100 coaches there, and how collaborative is it between yourself, Brian, and Sean? And then when you do have those 100 coaches there, I'm sure a lot of them have brilliant ideas. So, like, is it sort of is it interactive too?
Totally. And Shane, look, we'd always be hoping that anywhere we go or talk to people that we'll actually pick up stuff ourselves. Because again, I've mentioned the challenge me environment early on. Okay, every single time we do enter that, it's a challenge me environment for us, and we'd absolutely love to get questions and say, well, what are you going to say if you're asked this question? I don't care what question we're asked, because it's something that we can learn from some coach that will challenge some area and say, well, this is, we're stronger after that. So, this it's very interactive. The one in Cork we done was only an hour long. We'd normally like to do 4 or 5 hours, because it's more about, like, it's called Grow Coach for a reason. It's to grow coaches, and if clubs can start doing that, and there's like a merry-go-round where people can't get coaches anymore, and it's really hard to get coaches, and even from the people outside looking over the wire, it's not as nice as it used to be 20 years ago. There's loads of flack to go with coaching anymore. But I think if you can learn all the time as a coach and bring it onto the field, that you can show the players, not tell them. Sometimes we have coaches who keep telling them, but they actually don't even know what to do themselves. So I think it's often important that you can show what you're talking about and keep showing it, because it's 9 to 1 as showing and telling. So if you can short circuit that for your players, I think you're in a better position.
Kevin, this is an awful question. I'm going to throw it out, and it's an awful one to try and answer. Yeah, I appreciate that. Is there any particular coach that stands out, or who would you put down as one of the best coaches you've worked with or work under? Either during your own playing days or in recent years as manager of either Sligo or Galway, or anybody that stood out that really got you thinking, or that your values really aligned with?
Do you know, that's a really hard one to answer. I tell you why, because look, things have completely moved on as a player. I have to say, when I was playing, there was free Gaul coaching done, to be honest, right? And I'm not going to, like, there's loads of stuff put out there, but it's completely moved on from when I was a player. But bear in mind, I'm almost 20 years gone, so that's quite a while. But I think at the time, look at John O'Mahony came into us in '97. We were very lucky, and changed the whole thing around in preparations and all that type of stuff. I'm not so sure the coaching levels had gone awful high at that point. And then when I went into coaching back in 2008 with Sligo, I spent 5 years there as a manager, and I suppose spent 5 years in Galway, which meant I was in two environments that was being led up by myself. So I would love to go for a year here, a year there. So it's very hard for me to say a coach that would say I would be learning from coaches along the way when I was, I suppose, managing at the time. Or I'd love to be popping in now for a year or two here and there, like Paddy doing with us. Paddy's obviously a very good coach. I had Kevin Stritchin from these coaches in Dublin as well, very good as well, got great ideas there. I suppose there's more than the coaching. Jerry Hussey came in from the psychological side, who had loads of psychological games that were played with players, and again, that's part of coaching. So I was very lucky that Greg Muller came away with him from New Zealand coaching, and he's head of elite forces in New Zealand. So there's loads of stuff out there that kind of came into the coaching world that helped how you interact with players, maybe making KPIs, or how do you value your players, how they value you. Can you build up the value of a person that their attitude will change? All those type of things are maybe before the coaching itself. So if you say something like Greg Muller, Paddy Talley, Jerry Hussey, Kevin Stritch, Sean Condon himself, Brian Sake, those guys would be probably up there with me. I can't comment too much on other coaches out there who will be at the top of their game. I don't know if he's even coach or not. What their backroom team maybe was coaching. I don't know unless I'm in the camp. So sorry, I can't answer the question any better than that, but that's
no bother.
Kevin, when we was trying to organise getting you on the show, you were saying, "Oh, sorry, I was at basketball there for the last while." How much of an influence does basketball have in your thinking about Gaelic football? And are there any? There's probably some obvious ways where basketball has an influence, but are there more subtle ways that basketball has an influence on Gaelic football?
I think it's huge, and again, it depends how deep you go into the basketball or any sport. Look at the Australian rules; like they're massive on the different type of pressures you put on. So, is it standing pressure, coaxing pressure? Is it physical pressure, psychological pressure? All the different pressures. Where do you apply those pressures? So again, basketball comes into that. So if you look at all the sports, look at the soccer. They're pressing up, they're not pressing up. They allow your forward, back marking two, you're marking space. All these things can be brought into Gaelic football.